So one thing I was thinking was about how building a solo practice or a group practice can be really tough. So I put together a couple things to just help you move from being overwhelmed to building a thriving, profitable practice that you absolutely love. So I started putting together a lot of these things, and we turned it into a whole course. So we're calling it the basics of practice. There's one for solopreneurs, solo practitioners, and then also another one for group practitioners. You can see all of the videos over at practiceofthepractice.com/basics. But just like some of the lessons that are in there is we talk about private practice mindsets. We talk about exactly how to have the exact steps for establishing a successful group or solo. We talk about specific ways of marketing, networking, hiring, those things that you absolutely need to have a practice. So I just put that together for you. It's over at practiceofthepractice.com/basics. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1399. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast, where we help you build a thriving private practice you absolutely love. We cover all sorts of things. This summer, we have been covering since episode, 1393, how to convert more clients through your website. Then we talked about brain optimization. Then we talked about why building a boring private practice is better without the slimy marketing. And for the last half year or so, you've been following my building of Great Lakes online counseling, where every week I'm telling you how I'm spending my 2 hours building a private practice from scratch, step by step by step. So a lot of great things that have been covered throughout the summer. And today is no different. I am so excited. I have Melinda Briana Epler with me. Melinda is an internationally recognized speaker, author, and advisor known for advancing transformational solutions to climate change and social justice. With more than 20 years of experience, she elevates brands and develops mission-driven innovations strategies for startups, Fortune 500 companies, and global NGOs. Drawing on her background in storytelling, behavioral science, and large-scale transformation, she is a strategic communications and innovation advisor to organizations worldwide. She's a TED speaker and also the author of How to Be an Ally from McGraw-Hill and host of the popular Leading with Empathy and Allyship podcast. And her work's been featured all over the place, including Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, Forbes, and NPR. Melinda, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I am so excited to have this discussion about is DEI dead? But before we get into that, tell me what, I guess this is part of the question. What has shifted over the last couple of years that has really pushed back on DEI, on social justice, on the way companies are thinking? And obviously, the time of this recording in this news cycle, who knows what will have happened at that point.
Right.
But at the time
we can't predict the future.
Yeah. So tell me, like, what has shifted? What are you seeing in companies? Like, how are you conceptualizing all these shifts?
I'm going to start with what's not shifted.
Okay.
First, which is that deeply people across the world, across the United States, do believe in inclusion. And that has not fundamentally shifted. What has shifted is the loud protest against diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the subsequent work within the court systems to change how businesses operate around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So while I firmly believe that public perception and you and I have not fundamentally shifted our beliefs, there is a shift in how we do diversity, equity, and inclusion because of those shifts in the court system, ultimately. And we have this growing polarization. This happened, more than just the last few years, the last decade or two, where this growing polarization of people, of politics, and as a result, that has seeped into this diversity, equity, and inclusion work that we do.
Now, when you say the courts, what are some of the biggest shifts that happened as a result of the courts?
There are a few things. The Trump administration, the Trump administration sued several universities for their diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, and ultimately didn't win those suits, but it did change how companies thought about their diversity, equity, and inclusion work, because they didn't want to risk having a legal battle. Mm-hmm. And it took a long time for those things to go through the court system. So nobody knew what the outcome was going to be. So that was one. And then the other was a lawsuit against Fearless Capital for their venture capital work, specifically with Black women and lifting Black women entrepreneurs and supporting them directly. Ultimately, again, they didn't win that suit, but it did change how legal teams kind of feel about the risks involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as a result, diversity, equity, inclusion programs changed in corporations quite considerably. They laid off their diversity, equity, and inclusion teams, and have approached the work differently. Not all organizations, not all, and especially not in the nonprofit world. It hasn't really shifted in that same way. In government world, it definitely has, mm-hmm. Especially the federal government. Different in state and local governments.
Yeah. Now, what other macro things, we're going to get into kind of private practice and organizations and all of that, mm-hmm. also your expertise, but what other macro factors do we need to note before we kind of dig into more what this looks like in private practice?
Well, I think as it relates to private practice, there are some really big shifts happening in the world when it comes to climate change, and when it comes to the communities that are suffering most from climate change, from the shifts in the economy. And those are largely people who are historically marginalized, underrepresented within certainly within the therapy world, and within and often are lower and moderate income folks as well. So there's definitely a pressure for people with underrepresented identities, people with historically marginalized identities, and that is, that in the therapy world, that might look like more people experiencing like the effects and the fears around climate change, around just the day-to-day financial situations as a result. Yeah. So those are some other macro things that are happening that relate. They all interrelate.
Yeah. Well, I think, and we've done some episodes about this, just that idea of shifting as therapists when someone comes in and they say, I'm having a lot of anxiety around climate change.
Right.
Right now, our town, our river has flooded and is taking out like buildings and stuff because of just the snow melt and all that has happened at the time of this recording with a lot of rain. And it's just like, yeah, people have anxiety because their basements are flooding, because like rivers are overflowing, and that, there's been changes in what's going on in the environment. And so even just shifting that, to say some of this anxiety is actually warranted. We should be outraged by a lot of what's going on in the world, and like that's okay. Mm-hmm. When we think about specifically kind of inclusive like leadership in organizations, where do most business owners get it wrong?
Well, the easiest thing to get wrong is to center your own experience as the normal experience. Fundamentally, that's how a lot of exclusion happens, is when you're kind of thinking about yourself and your own experiences, your own historical experiences, your own way of doing, thinking, being, as being what is normal. Where, when you start to expand your idea of what is normal, suddenly there's a lot of different ways of doing, thinking, and feeling, and being as a result. So I think that would be number one. Number one is if you want to be an inclusive leader, if you want to be an inclusive therapist, that you're decentering your own experience as normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that, back in 2020 and 2021, during kind of Black Lives Matter and a lot of that kind of happening, for us at Practice the Practice, we started to evaluate, why do we have so many white consultants that have very specific, similar types of experiences? And as we really did a deep dive in looking at, well, who do we hire as consultants? It's usually people that have been in our communities. We've got to know them. We're attracting mostly, white women into our communities because, they often have the money or the means to be able to join one of those communities. And kind of working backward, just realizing that we wanted to partner more with a diverse number of organizations to get people into our communities that maybe couldn't even afford it. And to, with our conferences, even having, if you're just working with any population that is marginalized, however you define that, we're not even going to have a checklist or application. Like, you get a free or reduced cost ticket to our events, or you get free or reduced cost ticket into our memberships. And for us, then it's like we have been able to get more people into those communities, and to see, even in what our webinar slides look like, if we're doing a promo or things like that, to say we want to have all types of therapists, in those images, not just a bunch of, white men and women. And those shifts for us has led to some diversity within our communities. My worry as a leader is often that it comes across as performative, and that it's like, we're just changing some slides. How can leaders think through genuinely having change within their organization without it just being performative?
I think all of the things that you are doing are great and really helpful. And if you're only doing that, if you're only doing the external pieces of it, if you're only doing the changing people on your website and who's seen on your website, that can come across as tokenism, as a feeling that, you're only doing it because you're supposed to be doing it, because you should be doing it. And a lot of times I work with leaders who get frustrated because they're doing those things and they're hiring, but they're still not reaching a diverse population for a job, for example. And the issue is that you're only changing your website. You're not actually changing how you do what you do. You're not actually going out and seeking out people that in their own communities, right? If we can continuously hire in the same way that we have always hired, we're still not going to have a diverse pool of candidates, because we haven't actually gone out and found candidates in their own communities, right? So that's just one example of another would be, if you're doing all of those things, but you're still day to day in your work, you're not actually creating a workplace where people truly feel like they belong, where they feel that they can be themselves, they can interact with each other in a way that feels safe, and where they're welcome to be who they are, where they are able to really grow and thrive within your organization. That would be another huge example. And then a third for therapists too, is that you're not doing the work yourself to better understand trauma-informed practices, to better understand really how to be the best practitioner you can be with a diverse group of clients, right? Where you're it's really important that you do the work. Yeah.
I think we hear that a lot, like, do the work, and but tell me what that looks like. For therapists to dig in, to do some of the work, and obviously everyone has their own kind of choose your own adventure based on where they're coming from. But
Right.
what are some guiding principles, lights, kind of within that to help do your own work that then flows out into your practice or your life?
Yeah, I know I'm not a therapist, so I will say that. I would say it has to do with educating yourself. That's a big piece of it, which before you do that, you have to understand and really deeply look within to recognize where the things you don't know, the biases that you might have, and even within a one-on-one conversation with somebody, you can be checking in with yourself, checking in on your own biases. That is the work. It is more cognitive and constantly like checking in with yourself is work. It's extra work, but it is extra important for the work that you do. That self-regulation that I'm sure you teach your clients is so important for you to do as well as in your work. And so I guess I would say that it's looking within to understand your own biases, recognizing them, doing the work outside of the practice to continuously learn and grow. And you can't do it all just by checking in with yourself. That's why I wrote the book that I did. And it's really important to get those additional that additional understanding as you approach the work. Right. So it's the education, it's the self-regulation, it's and checking in with your own biases. And if you do those things, I think that you'll be a much better therapist, a much better business leader, and you'll start to transform not only yourself, but others.
Yeah. Something I hear over and over from practice owners in the Practice Academy is the one class I never was taught in grad school was how to run my business. And honestly, I felt that same thing. It's not a personal failing, but it's a gap in how we train clinicians. You build something that's real, your private practice, and nobody handed you a playbook for intake, billing, team management, or what it actually takes to scale past a handful of clinicians. That's what Valent is built for. Valent is the EHR designed exclusively for behavioral health group practices. With 2 decades of experience, 13 million clients engaging in their EMR, and 28,000 providers using their platform, Valent offers the tools that close the gap in your documentation, billing, and operations. Also, they include AI that handles the admin work so that your team will stay focused on your clients. Valent created a free interactive resource specifically for group practice owners like you. It's called Breaking Through the Growth Ceiling. In literally 5 minutes, it pinpoints your biggest bottleneck right now with a 90-day playbook to fix it. It is awesome. So if you want to break through the ceiling of growth that you feel like you just haven't been able to break through, grab that for free over at valent.io/Joe. That's valent.io/Joe. Valent is spelled VALANT.io/Joe. It's interesting digging into some of this work. Like recently I listened to Bell Hook's book, The Will to Change, and just realizing how I didn't realize when I heard people pushing back against patriarchy, I took it as this like personal, like, you're a bad man. But then realizing how much I lost as a man in being in I went to Catholic school. It was a very like football, Friday Night Lights kind of school. And just realizing that my like artistic side, my like actor side, like all of this creative side really was pushed out of me, and how sad that is, and there's like a lot of things that it's like when we dig into these big social issues and realizing that we're critiquing the system. We're not necessarily saying like this one person is the problem. And there are things that men do that is the problem, in that discussion, like there's some very toxic things that happen. And so I think that finding that lane to dig into more, I personally sometimes get overwhelmed with, I could worry about climate change, I could worry about patriarchy, I could worry about parenting, I can worry about, cultural issues, my white privilege. And then at the end of the day, I'm just a tired parent. And it's like,
right.
Okay, maybe I'll listen to 10 minutes while I drive around town and pick up a kid from one practice and then pause it and talk to them and do it for the next. When people want to put in time to this, let's talk about your book, How to Be an Ally. Let's talk about the elements of it, and then the elements that maybe we could be peppering into more of what we do. So let's just start with what is a good ally?
At the foundational level, a good ally is somebody who is listening and learning constantly, where you're approaching people with empathy and then you're taking action upon it. Right?
Listening,
so you're
empathy, action.
Yes. Listening, empathy, action. Yep. Allyship is empathy in action, essentially. And in order to get to that state of empathy, you have to be listening and learning, right? And so the first step in allyship is really learning and unlearning and relearning, right? We have so many, and exactly what you did when you listened to the Bell Hooks book, right? You are doing some retrospective unlearning in that moment, right? And then we relearn with that new perspective, and we reapproach with that new perspective. We walk into the world a little bit differently as a result. So that first step of learning, unlearning, and relearning, that's when we learn biases, right? We're not born with them. We learn them. And step by step, and it takes step by step, right, to unlearn them, and then to approach things in a new way, to relearn. Yeah. And so, yeah. And then we continuously are doing that self-regulation around biases, where we're checking in with ourselves. Wait a minute. Before I say something or do something, is this a biased feeling or thought? And then before it comes out, we're changing how we speak, how we act. And then eventually, as an ally, we are stepping up and stepping in when we see something that is not right. Right, where we're doing something about it, we're protesting, or we're in our daily work, we're recognizing that someone that we're working with is experiencing the impact of exclusion, right? That's where you want to get, right? Is that understanding of, wait a minute, they aren't seeing it, but I have this unique perspective where I am seeing, that comes from this other place. Right. And then we're helping them to transform.
Tell me, I know storytelling is a huge part of your work. Tell me a story of, someone that represents allyship. Maybe it was through the writing of the book, or maybe just a story about an ally that to you really kind of brings this to life.
Ooh. Well, I want to encourage listeners to take a moment and think about that today. Like, who has shown up for you as allies? It does make it much more real when we look into ourselves and kind of. And sometimes I have noticed, I've done this lots of allyship workshops, and I've noticed that for some of us, it takes a while to really come up with those allies in our lives. So if it doesn't happen right away, keep thinking about it, keep mulling about it, and eventually those folks will come up into your memory. So I want to encourage listeners to do that. For me, it's been a lot of little things. When I was in college, transferring schools. I wanted to go I was at the Art Center College of Design in an MFA program, and it just wasn't quite right for me. I wanted to go to USC Film School. And so I approached one of my professors that taught at both institutions, and I said, "Hey, will you write me a recommendation?" Well, he didn't just write me a recommendation. He said, "Give me your application." He printed it out, and he walked it into the dean's office at USC and said, "You need to interview her." Wow. It only took him an extra 5 minutes of his day. But fundamentally, I got an interview, and then from there, I had to take it and make it happen. But he got me in the door there, right? And it's a 5-minute thing. He probably didn't even remember it, a year later. But for me, I still remember it many years later. It is the little things like that fundamentally can shift somebody's life that make a difference.
Just that idea of using our privilege and power to open more doors. It's what would that look like to do that more openly? Right. Are you asking me that question? I don't know that I was asking it, but I think, thinking about that, like, wow, like, Yeah, I guess maybe that is a question. It was
Yeah.
more just like pondering it, and then it
Yeah,
did
I
come out as
agree.
a very awkward question. So
Yeah, I love it. No, it's good. It's a good question and something for us all to think about. Like, what if we all walked into the world having more empathy for each other and taking action on that empathy?
yeah,
How much of a better place would we be living in, right?
yeah,
And start with the small steps, the small little things that you can do. Even the recognition when you go into a store that the person on the other side of the cash register has had a bad day, and giving them a little bit of um, warmth and understanding, right?
yeah.
That can go a long way. Who knows how that could make a difference in their day? Let alone working with somebody and recognizing, oh, wow, they're going through something major. How can I really support them in this moment so that so they move through it with more ease? And yeah, I mean, how amazing would that be? How amazing would it be if we made big decisions and small decisions based on empathy?
Yeah. Well, and I'm noticing what's coming up for me is I don't want to do this from a place of kind of like being the white savior colonialist coming in and saying to the BIPOC population, I have more power than you, let me open doors for you. And like, I'll be the knight in shining armor. And then that makes me not want to do things. But then it also is like, what's the sweet spot of how you do that authentically? Like, it's like, I don't want it to be performative. I don't want to tell anyone that I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing it. And obviously, I'm doing a podcast publicly about it. But it's like, how do we challenge those things so that there's just recognizing this system makes it that fear, that worry, that
Mm-hmm.
colonialism, that patriarchy, that white privilege is all part of it, and that's a burden that I have to have. Like that comes
Yeah,
with the territory.
yeah.
And oh, poor me, white Joe in Northern Michigan. It's like that's just part of this struggle for myself to work through. And I think recognizing that there's not a perfect answer, and that doesn't mean I should
Mm-hmm.
have action.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, there's so much in what you said, and part of it is being transparent about it. Part of it is being open about it and knowing that you're going to make mistakes, but still continuing to do the work. And doing the work means sometimes just, again, doing the work does not necessarily mean a really difficult thing. It just means approaching people with empathy, right?
Yeah.
At the very basic level. And when you're transparent and open about your constant learning journey, people will respect that, will trust you more, will be more forgiving if you do make mistakes, will help you. I will say some of my greatest allies are also people who are from underrepresented communities and have educated me,
Hmm.
right? And I'm so grateful for the time that they have spent with me, educating me, right? That also is allyship, when we're educating each other and when we're moving forward together with a greater understanding. So yes, we all have work to do, and we all have more to learn.
Mhm.
And it's really important that we don't let that get in the way of taking action.
Mhm.
Even if we're not taking action in the most perfect way possible, taking action is helpful and important. And it's also a way that you learn, right? If you're not taking action, you're only learning you only have book knowledge. But when you're taking action, you have real knowledge and understanding, and have ways that you're going to do things a little bit better the next time and the next time and the next time, and that constant learning process. And it also gives us more ease each time. Each time we do it, it gets a little bit easier. And so definitely we can get caught in wanting to be the perfect ally and learning and learning and learning and learning before we actually take action. And that is not perfect allyship.
Sure, sure.
Right. Right.
Well,
Yeah.
before I have
So I
you
love it.
answer the last question, I want to have you just like picture an average therapist. They have maybe a small group practice. They feel something bubbling up inside that they want to be a better ally. They want their
Mm.
practice to be more socially just. They want to value DEI. They want to value other people. They want to all those things, and they maybe don't fully know how. what are some questions that they could ask themselves that might just distill or clarify a little bit more for them that they could just ponder?
We'll start with the who and the kind of diversity piece of it. Who are you hiring if you are building a team? Who are you working with? Who are your clients? How are you making yourself more accessible to people who may not find you otherwise, and or be able to pay otherwise? Then the inclusion piece of it is kind of, how are you checking in with your own biases regularly? What does that look like? How are you learning? What kinds of things are you learning about? Who are you learning from? And how are you putting it into practice in your work? What does that look like on a daily, in your daily practice? What does it look like on your website? What does it look like in the way that you practice what you practice? Equity is another piece of it too. It is part of it is the access and the opportunities that you're providing. Part of it is recognizing the inequities and marginalization historically and currently and in the future, right? And employing that understanding in your practice as well.
Great questions to ponder. Melinda, the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
Trust yourself as an ally, and keep learning and unlearning and relearning and building trust around you.
So good. If people want to get your book, if they want to follow your work, your podcast, all that, where can they find that?
MelindaBrianaEpler.com is my website. My book is available in most major booksellers online, How to Be an Ally. And you can also find my TED Talk online at TED.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation.
I think as I do shows like this, it just reminds me of how much work there is to be done in the world, in ourselves. I think about just making changes in myself to be a better partner in my relationship, to be a better person in the world. It really can feel overwhelming. And over the last year, as we've had people talk about all sorts of different major topics in the world, picking one lane and digging deep into that seems to be something that people say way more than, hey, become a armchair, not even expert in 50 different things. So I want to encourage you to pick a lane, for yourself, pick a lane for where you're learning, and go back to that idea that we need to learn to lead into empathy that then leads into action. So if you're finding value in this show, just want to remind you that we have a full membership community called the Practice Academy over at practiceofthepractice.com/member. We would love for you to join that. Also, we have our free courses available to you now. It's all the basics of private practice, whether you're in solo or in group, over at practiceofthepractice.com/basics. Also, we couldn't do this show without our sponsors. Hey, special thanks to Valent today for sponsoring this show. They put together an amazing resource. It's going to take you 5 minutes to quickly evaluate what's stopping your growth. It's going to pinpoint your biggest bottlenecks right now and give you a 90-day playbook to fix it. You can download that totally free over at valent.io/Joe. That's VALANT.io/Joe to grab that resource. Thank you for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.